The other day, my wife, Marisol, was puzzled, and she brought this article to me that she had read that spoke about, it quoted Kamala Harris as saying that Donald Trump was telling people that he was going to, if he were president, raise taxes on middle income or middle class people by $3,000 a person. And she said, this doesn't make any sense. So I said, give me that article. It doesn't make any sense to me either. And as I read it, what it really said was that because of the tariffs that Trump is speaking about imposing were he to become president, that some economists that Kamala Harris was referring to calculated that the result of the tariffs would be essentially an effective increase in spending by middle-class consumers for the same goods by $3,000 a person. How horribly misleading. So it motivated me to think about communicating to all of you my take on tariffs. It kind of goes back to the whole movement of globalization, which I track back to the 1990s, when companies, American companies primarily, decided to move jobs, manufacturing jobs, out of the heartland of our country to lower cost places where people were paid very, very little, $1 a day, whatever. And of course, those companies, the executives and their shareholders all benefited from massive increases in profits as a result of reducing those expenses at the expense of all of those who had been American employees in those manufacturing jobs. Obviously, this makes no sense. Obviously, what happened was a huge wealth transfer from everyone who didn't own the stocks of those companies or didn't work there to those people. And the big losers, obviously, were the families whose jobs were displaced. So what is tariffs? What are tariffs? Tariffs are simply a way to reverse that, to undo that, to say, okay, listen, whomever, Nike, Apple, multinational companies that exported those jobs, if you want to enjoy the benefits of reduced labor costs, you're going to have to pay a large amount to the United States government of that savings, of the increased profits associated with those reduced costs. Makes perfect sense. And the question of whether those companies will be able to pass along the higher costs associated with higher labor because they're going to have to manufacture either in the United States at a higher cost or pay the tariffs. No, they're not going to be able to pass that along to the consumers because in the end, prices trade at affordability levels. So you can't charge more than people can afford, and as we probably all know, the consumer in America is already stretched to the limit. They can't pay any more for anything. So the idea that $3,000 a year is going to be passed along because of those tariffs to the consumers, that is actually idiotic. The consumers, middle-class consumers, don't have $3,000 extra. They just won't buy those goods if the prices are increased to try to pass along those increased costs to the consumer. And in the end, what will happen is those companies will just make less money. Wonderful. They have enjoyed a bonanza for 25 or 30 years, and now it's time to reverse that bonanza in favor of those of us who have been consumers, or those Americans that have lost their jobs, or taxpayers that have had to subsidize all of that expense. So bravo, tariffs, wonderful idea.